Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Craig Letton, CEO of hyble, a martech platform for the beverage industry that's raised $8 million in funding. Craig, how are you?
I'm great. Nice to meet you, Brett.
Yeah, you too. Super excited to have you here. I think you're the first guest that we've had on in about 1,200 episodes that's in the beverage industry. So tell us, how'd you end up in this world?
That's a great question. Yeah, so my story is pretty typical. So I started my career in sort of consumer goods, working in sales and marketing, and then decided that big companies weren't for me and took the opportunity to take over the family business, which at the time was a print business based in Scotland. You might be able to tell from my accent, which was run by my parents. And at the time, it was a small business turning over less than $1 million with a large number of kind of customers doing different things to different people. And with my experience of kind of selling and marketing consumer goods, I came into that business with a few ideas of what could work. And I actually identified something that they built in the company that I thought added incredible value. And that was essentially a web platform that essentially enabled salespeople in the drinks industry, selling beer, wine, and spirits, to create marketing materials such as wine lists, cocktail lists, and other physical marketing materials to produce that online in a matter of minutes and have that printed and shipped to their customer in just a matter of days. And from my experience of working at Kraft and having actually done that role in field sales and understanding how laborious that traditional process was, when I saw the technology they'd built, I thought, wow, that solves a real problem that I've experienced and I know is painful. And if we can productize that and scale it up, then we could sell this to the biggest drinks companies in the world. So cut a very long story short, I ended up buying the company from my parents at full market value. We had about 7 people at the time, took some investment, built a product, and then took it to market. And from then, we've kind of gone from turning over about just under $1 million to this year, we'll turn over just under 20 in the space of maybe 7 or 8 years. So yeah, it's been a hell of a journey.
What do you attribute to that growth? Because, I feel weird saying this, but $8 million in the context of a venture-backed startup, it's not a lot of money. It feels weird saying that $8 million isn't much, but like I said, in the venture world, it's not a huge amount of money, especially to achieve that kind of growth. What have you gotten right that so many other startups who raise stupid amounts of money and don't have anywhere close to that much revenue, what are they getting wrong?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, by US standards, that is a tiny amount. In the UK, we typically fund companies with smaller amounts of capital. And believe it or not, that 8 million is over 3 rounds. So we've kind of very much had like a drip feed funding model, which has forced us to be super capital efficient. I think in terms of what's worked is at the end of the day, we have a solution that serves a real world problem. And it's a problem that I experienced, so I could deeply understand kind of the benefits that it would provide to customers. But we also designed the product in a way that I knew that would work for the user group, which is salespeople, and particularly salespeople in the drinks industry that don't have much time, don't have much patience, and just want to do stuff quick and easy. So the first thing is we built a product that solves a real world problem at scale, delivers real value, cash value to these customers quickly, and works really well for their user base. So I think that's kind of, at the end of the day, you got to have a product that adds value, right? That's kind of the starting point. And then I think the second thing is that from day one, we just got out there and sold and gone to the biggest customers in the world with very little fear and a lot of ambition and just gone for it. I had a sales call earlier today. I've been doing this for 13 years. I'm still doing sales calls now as the CEO. And back in the day, we were doing 5 or 6 per day, right? So we've just always been out there selling, always about kind of pushing the business. And I'm not a technologist. I can't write a line of code to save my life. We've got a whole team of people that do that. At the end of the day, I just kind of understood the problem and knew how to sell it. And then we've built a team around that capability and then kind of expanded that.
Let's talk about your decision to relocate from Scotland to Boston. So I know there was a big deal. Can you tell us about, any details that you can share about that big deal and what that was like to convince your wife that you're moving to Boston?
Yeah. Well, I think over the course of those years, we kind of expanded with big customers, people like Bacardi, Diageo, Pernod Ricard, Carlsberg, and we kind of expanded across Europe. That was really our growth story, was international expansion. But for me, I always wanted to crack the US. I went to high school in the US, up here in Boston. I always had an affinity for the country, and I knew that's where the biggest opportunities lay. And so I actually started looking at the market back in 2017, and eventually, through a bit of kind of good fortune, a bit of serendipity, I managed to make contact with the largest wine and spirits distributor in the US, a company called Southern Glazers Wines and Spirits. And I actually made contact with the son of the CEO. And funnily enough, that was through a podcast and several degrees of connection. And they were looking for what we did. And there wasn't anything in the US marketplace that did it. And essentially, we ended up doing an 18-month proof of concept in 4 different states to kind of prove that our technology would work in the US market. We got lots of feedback, lots of input from their sales reps. We actually ran this during COVID, which is not the best time to run a proof of concept in the alcohol industry in hospitality, but we made it work. And we did it all virtually from Scotland. We then went into an 18-month RFP where we went up against their incumbent vendor they'd had for 15 years and one other. And we successfully won that contract. I think I made 7 trips to Miami during that period and built a really great relationship with Southern Glazers. So we then began the rollout in June 23, just after we signed the contract. So it was a bit of a crazy time because the contract was so large, and put it in perspective, it was more than 10 times the size of any contract we'd ever won previously, that we knew that if we won it, which I was always confident we would need to be able to deliver it immediately. So we were actually scaling up the business in terms of being able to deliver this contract, which included completely rebuilding the platform in an 18-month period, so that when we won the contract, we were ready to hit the ground running. So we actually invested heavily during that period and did 2 additional rounds of funding to build out that team, build out the infrastructure, build out the technology. So we kind of bet it all on winning this contract. Thankfully, we did, because I'd also sold my house, my cars, and pretty much everything I'd owned and moved to the US a week after we won the contract. So yeah, pretty intense. But the way that I sold that to my wife was, at the end of the day, this is going to be doing great things for the company. It's going to grow the valuation of the company and give us opportunities that we've never imagined, which has actually happened. So I'm glad to say that, now in 2025, we've completed the rollout of that deal, and the company has grown. We grew 100% last year. This year, we'll grow another 50%, all off the back of that one contract.
Wow.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
Does that ever make you nervous to have one contract be such a big portion of your revenue? I feel like I always hear stuff with founders, saying you don't want that to happen, but I don't know if any founder can say no to that when the money's on the table.
Yeah, at the moment, I'm actually back on the new business trail as we speak to reduce that sort of customer concentration we've created. But the way that I kind of view that is like, we just happened to win the biggest account first in the US. I would have been quite happy to win any of the top 10 distributors. We just happened to win the largest and most complex, which as a blessing and a curse. A blessing that gives us amazing growth, and we've been able to build our infrastructure and learn about the market. And now when we have meetings with new customers that maybe operate in a handful of states, it's somewhat easy in comparison to what we've already done. But the downside, obviously, is you now have a lot of revenue with one customer. But the only way to dilute that is to go after more, which is exactly what we're doing. And at the end of the day, we have a really great contract with that company. They're the 10th largest private business in America. We have a multi-year contract that's pretty secure. And, we're doing a great job for them, and they love what we do. So it doesn't make me anxious, but I can see why some investors might look at that and go,
what about on the marketing side? If we just zoom out, how would you describe your general marketing philosophy?
Well, our marketing, to be honest with you, has been almost non-existent, which might sound a bit insane, but we actually don't even have a marketing department. We have one lady that does a phenomenal job on 1 day a week right now, doing some LinkedIn posts and doing some website updates, and that's it. So our kind of go-to-market model has always been sales oriented. And the reason for that is one of the things I did early on in the business is I shut down everything else that wasn't alcohol. So we turned off a lot of business with other customers in other industries because I realized that, when you have a company that's that small, and we bootstrapped for years before we ever took any funding, if you have limited resources, you really need to focus on a very narrow group of customers. And what we did is we said, okay, we're only going to focus on beverage alcohol suppliers and distributors at that time in the UK. Then we expanded to Europe, Australia, and now America. But the benefit of kind of being really narrow is you have a very small audience. So we know exactly the companies we want to speak to. We know exactly the people and what roles they're in. We know how to get in front of them. And we know that once we get in front of them, we're pretty damn good at closing. So for us, we don't need to hire, a team of AEs doing outbound. We don't need to go to events and spend a ton of money. We don't need to do lots of PR. It's just getting in front of the right people and having that right conversation, which over time we've become really, really good at. So I'm not sure I would recommend that strategy to everyone, but we've made that really effective.
That's incredible. You've been able to grow this much with, not even a full marketing team or not even a full-time team member on the marketing team. That's absolutely incredible. I think a lot of founders listening in, they started off jealous, hearing about the revenue you're at. Now they're getting even more jealous, just hearing how small that team is. So you're creating a lot of jealous founders in the audience, I'm sure. When it comes to founder-led sales, what does your approach look like? What are you doing specifically?
Yeah, so I think my style is quite unique. I didn't really kind of fully understand it until I heard about a concept called the challenger sale, which is a really good book actually, but it kind of summarizes my style. And one of the outcomes of that book is that we found that this challenger style is actually the most effective style of selling. And many people think about sales as, the sort of stereotypical relationship person, someone that's great at conversation, someone that can engage anybody, they can talk at length. And what they actually found in that research was that was the least effective style. And actually the most effective style was the person that comes in and actually challenges the status quo of the customer and says, look, tell me about what you're doing now. What are the downsides of it? What are the issues with it? And actually saying, look, here's a better way of doing this. Here's the benefits that it can provide you. Here's what the future will look like if you were to buy from us. And here's how we've done it for other people and how we could get you to the same place. And that's really the kind of style that I kind of adopted and felt natural to me and has proven to work really well. And now that we're kind of in the process of making the transition from founder-led sales to actually having a team, that's the same idea that I'm bringing to that team and kind of encouraging they adopt, because it's very much more about being consultancy-led. And really, again, one of the benefits of focusing on one industry, I've been doing this for 13 years now, is I know a lot about the alcohol industry, right? Across the globe, I've worked with suppliers, distributors in over 50 different countries. And I have a really deep understanding. So I kind of understand their industry, understand the dynamics, understand the challenges they've got. And then I've got a whole bunch of stories that, we can use from existing rollouts and implementations with customers. So I think what we're really good at is being able to add value for that customer, showing them how they can either save money or make more money by adopting our technology. We're not really selling the tech. We're selling the benefits of the tech that they will get once they've implemented it. Then we're able to demonstrate it with evidence from the previous deals that we've done. So now that we've kind of got, some serious momentum, particularly in the US after winning the largest account, it almost gets a little easier as you go. So you kind of get that snowball effect.
That's amazing. What about, and this is maybe unrelated to the general topics that we cover, but let's zoom out. Because you're an expert in the alcohol industry, what do you think is the state of the market? I'm in my mid 30s. I'm definitely drinking a lot less. I feel like a lot of my friends are drinking a lot less. I've read stories that people are drinking less. Is that true? Or am I just getting old? How do you describe the state of the market?
Yeah, in Europe and North America, it is true. In other markets, it's not. But in the more mature kind of markets, it definitely is. People are drinking less. And that is having an impact on the industry. And the industry saw a huge boom during COVID. People were stuck at home. They didn't have much to do. People drank a lot more. So our customers experienced massive growth during that time. And that's now obviously unwinding. It's hard to lap a year when you're selling that much. I don't know what it was like in the US, but in the UK during that time, everybody went out and bought toilet paper for some reason. So I always think it'd be hard to be a toilet paper salesperson in 2023 once the pandemic's over. It's hard to lap those years. So we're seeing that same thing now in drinks industry. We're seeing it in the bike industry. All those industries that boomed during COVID are having a bit of kind of normalization. So certainly there's a number of factors that are impacting it, including this COVID kind of hangover, if you'll excuse the pun, but also the fact that people are drinking less. But what we've noticed is that they're now drinking different drinks. So they're moving into non-alcoholic products, such as, some brilliant non-alcoholic beers out there. They're moving into hemp-based drinks and just moving into other categories and changing what they drink. So it's an interesting time to be in the market, but the way that we've adapted to that is that we are now emphasizing the cost-saving benefits of our platform. I heard it in a sales call today with a customer. They're looking to save money, right? Because sales are down. So that's where I think it's really important to be able to understand the dynamics of the market, read the market, and then be able to change the way that you sell into it, depending on what's going on in the kind of wider environment.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their US and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
When it comes to the competitive landscape, what does that look like? Is there an established player? Is it super fragmented? What's the competitive landscape?
Yeah. So again, the benefit of it kind of going super niche as we've done is that there's less competition. And in the US market, there's really only one competitor. When we won this large deal with Southern Glazers, we actually kicked them out of their biggest account. So if you think about it, it's essentially at the time we were 50 people, a small startup from Scotland. We didn't even have anyone in the US at the time. We won the biggest account in the industry from a competitor who had worked with them for 15 years. And the reason that we won that is a couple of reasons. One is they hadn't invested in technology. They had really kind of milked their technology and their customers for a long period of time. So they weren't coming to the table with innovation or ideas or improvements. And the customers were frustrated by that. And they'd also kind of outsourced and offshored a lot of their service. So in terms of like their customer support, customer success, some of the more manual work was being done overseas, which had a reduction in the service quality. And then also they just hadn't invested in the relationships. So the CEO of that company, who's now no longer with them because they've been acquired, he hadn't been to visit their biggest customer in over 7 years. I'd been there 7 times in 12 months coming from Scotland. Yeah, they just got complacent. And you see that a lot. A lot of big companies, once they get to a point of success, they just get complacent, they milk it, they start pulling out costs. And then that gives an opportunity for a company like us to come in with something better. And the way that we competed against that was that we competed on strategy. So we competed with technology. So we said, look, at the moment, what you're doing is all manual. We're using huge teams of graphic designers in India to produce all this content. Here's a technology platform you can put in the hands of your salespeople to do it themselves. So you can save loads of time, loads of money, and loads of resources. And then secondly, when we actually also support the delivery and fulfillment of all of the print goods that come out of the end of our app. So we don't just do the software, we also manage the supply chain. And we were able to say, look, we don't own any printers. So we can actually distribute this across a network of printers across the US, which means we can do faster delivery times. So we took their delivery time from 2 weeks down to less than 4 days because we were able to print closer to the location. And we can actually be much more agile with how we work with them. And then the final piece is relationship, right? I particularly invested a lot of time in building the relationships with the key people in that company. And even today, I was just down there last week and spent 4 hours with them. And we've just got a really great working relationship. And those don't just come by coincidence. You work on those over a long period of time and you get to know the people, you get to understand their business, and then you continue to add more value. So that's really kind of how we won that account. But to be honest, that's just the best practice we've learned over years of doing this.
What about your market categories? Since this is category visionaries, we of course have to ask, how do your customers think about category? How do you think about category?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to look at like a Gartner report or something, they call this technical term for what we do is like through channel marketing automation or something like that. But that makes no sense to our customers. They don't really care about that. For them, we talk their language, and their language is how do we help their sales reps support more customers with marketing that helps the sales of their brands. So we always kind of try and simplify things. And because at the end of the day, if you're a drink supplier like Diageo, Bacardi, or you're a distributor, at the end of the day, their goal is to sell more products. And the way that they do that is they support customers to sell more of their products. And the technology is simply the vehicle to make it more efficient and more scalable. And so again, we kind of go back to what are the benefits we're selling? Well, we're selling the ability to support more customers in less time, with less cost, with less people. It just so happens that technology is the way that we do that. And I think that probably comes back to the fact that I'm not a technologist. I'm not selling technology. I'm selling the benefits of what we do. And so are our team.
What about priorities for the year? So we're somehow 1 quarter in. I don't know about you, but this year seems to be flying by for me. In terms of the priorities for the year, what are your top priorities?
Yeah, sure. We've got 2 clear priorities. But with any plan, things happen or outside of the plan that you can't consider at the time. So we've had a couple of those already in Q1. But the plan for us really is kind of twofold. One is going after more new business. As I said, we've got a lot of revenue with one customer. The only way to fix that is to build more business. So we're now going after more wine distributors in the US. We're also expanding into beer, soft drinks, which are kind of close adjacent verticals that have very similar properties to wine and spirits, and markets verticals where we already have experience in Europe. So we're not going too far out. And then we're also looking at verticals that are a little bit more tangential. So things like cannabis and food service, which industries we don't work in right now, but again, have similar properties. So going after new business is the big one. And then the second one for us is all about how do we drive stronger gross margins? And the way that we're doing that is actually through technology. So we're automating a lot of the stuff that we do behind the scenes. And in particular, we're using AI to do a lot of that. heavy lifting that previously would have been done manually. So those are our two focuses for the year, and all of our projects and all of our work and driven around those two goals.
Final question for you. Let's zoom out 3 to 5 years into the future. What's the big picture vision look like here?
For me, there's kind of like a couple different angles of growth. One is kind of moving into new verticals, as I've explained. And the second one is kind of expanding the product capabilities. So we are now looking at things like data. So we actually capture a ton of data every time an order is placed in our app. And we're now looking at how can we actually build that back into the app so that when salespeople are using it, they can use that data to inform what they're doing. And while also feeding that back to our customers, because we realize that it's super valuable. We're also expanding into digital media. So we're looking at some partnerships at the moment about how do we kind of take what we do now, but expand it into digital and social media, which are kind of obvious next steps. And then the third one is kind of, again, looking at new markets. So we've always gone international. When you're from a small country like Scotland with only 5 million people, you want to build a business of scale, you kind of have to go global. So we're now live across Europe, Australia, parts of Africa, and the US, but there's still lots more to go at, including Latin America, which is kind of next on the list. So we've got a ton of growth opportunities ahead of us. We are considering taking further funding to be able to fuel that. And, taking our kind of capital efficient model, but putting a bit more fuel into it. So we're definitely looking at that potentially later this year. But for now, that's kind of where we see the growth. And that's what we're focused on doing.
Amazing, man. I love it. This has been a lot of fun. Been a very different conversation. We're used to speaking with early stage venture-backed startups with a lot of money raised, very little revenue, trying to gain traction. So this has been a really fun conversation, really enjoyable one. And I know the audience is going to love it. Before we wrap here, if there's founders who are inspired and want to follow on with you and your journey, where should we send them?
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active there. So yeah, just send me a message. And, I've had a lot of help from people along the way. So I have a large debt of gratitude I need to pay back. So feel free to contact me and, I'll help in any way that I can.
Amazing. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brett.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.